All right. So we are going to get started. I'm super, super excited. I mean, you guys have heard about Ken, learned about Ken, read about Ken, but there's just nothing like getting to hear him in person. There's no better storyteller. I always tell the story that when I first met Ken, we had someone who was supposed to introduce us, and he kept not introducing us. And I had heard so much about Ken and was so eager and excited to meet him that I actually was sitting with this gentleman that was supposed to connect us. And I took his phone and I looked for the name Ken Aldrich in the phone. And I sent a text saying, "Hey, Ken, it's Gary. I really want to introduce you to Nancy Gale." And finally, the
never told me that story, Nancy.
I thought I told you that story. Oh no. And yeah, so that's your first email came from me as Gary. So we finally connected and we planned a little lunch, and we ended up speaking for about 3.5, 4 hours. And that was a game-changing day for me. So what I'd really love to do is, obviously, Ken, introduce yourself, and I'd love you to start off just talking about your journey from the Dust Bowl to here.
Okay, I'll do the best. I'll do the best I can. It was a little after the Dust Bowl. I grew up in Oklahoma City, one of the suburbs of Oklahoma City, anyway, and so we were a sort of typical lower middle class or lower class family. We weren't rich. Definitely weren't rich, and we weren't really poor. Oklahoma was not a bad place to grow up, actually, in those days. It was safe. It was a sort of a warm community. And I didn't realize till I got to college that it was also pretty insular. So I got to college finally, and my classmates who had gone to Eastern prep schools were talking about books that I'd never even heard of, that everybody should have heard of, but I hadn't. So I had to play catch up for quite a while in college, but I did catch up, and ended up going through college, got to law school, ended up spending a year in New York, ostensibly on a scholarship, but really goofing around, quite frankly, kind of my interim year. And then went back to law school at the Harvard Law School and started practicing law. Practiced for 3 or 4 years, was with a big firm here in Los Angeles. And then one day, I don't know how much you guys know about the law practice and some of the stuff, but I'll tell you a little bit. They used to file, and I guess they still do, things called registration statements. If you had stock that you wanted to sell to the public, you would fill out this incredibly long and complicated form, and you ended up with sort of a book. But in the process, you'd have the lawyers on one side of the table for the company, and the lawyers for the underwriters who were supposed to sell the stock, and the underwriters themselves. And you'd all sit around all day basically chasing commas. And nobody liked anybody else's prose, and it was a gigantic waste of time, but we all did it. And as the lawyers, we were happy because they paid us a lot of money. So I got to the end of one of these days, and I was with a partner who was one of the senior partners in the firm. And the underwriters and their counsel and said, "Okay, we're going to go off to dinner at Perino's." At that time, Perino's was one of the premier restaurants in LA. "And can you guys get some sandwiches in and have the next draft of this ready by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning?" And my partner, for whom I work, said, "Oh yeah, we'll do that." And I thought to myself, there's something wrong with this picture. I don't mind. I'm 20 something years old. I don't mind working, leading sandwiches and working late at night. But when I'm a partner in this firm, what kind of a future is that, to be eating sandwiches while the clients go out to lunch or dinner in that case? So I said, I've got to get out of here. So it took me a little while to figure out how, and it was scary because, pardon the noise in the background, we're testing out our new Ring device and haven't mastered it yet. Because lawyers were lawyers, and it was very hard to get anybody in business to hire a lawyer. So I finally found somebody, and I left and took a big salary cut and wasn't sure I'd have a job 2 weeks later. But I said, I got to do this. Well, what was very interesting there, and I'm rambling a bit, but I think it may be helpful, is I found any number of my colleagues in the law firm, mostly younger people my age, um, were jealous. And I said, to myself at least, what are you jealous of? I just left the firm. I have no guarantee of income. Um, I took a big pay cut. And why are you jealous of me? And I realized later that what they were jealous of was that I had made a break and had decided to go and do something closer to my dream. Um, and I did, but I later, many years later, I thought about that, and it's one of the things that got me started being a mentor in Nancy's classes, which I did up until last year, and I had some health issues, so I can't get down there at the usual hour in the morning, but I hope to come back before too long. Anyway, so I looked at it and I said, you know, one of the reasons that they were jealous is that these are people who had no concept of what other alternatives there were in life. And then I started relating it to some of the younger people I knew, and I was a volunteer in a school in the inner city. I guess that it was not a horrible place, but it was okay. And I realized that a lot of the young people your age, but maybe without the advantages you've had with Nancy and Brandy, had no idea what the choices were. So life became a question of, well, I'm going to get my high school diploma or my GED, and I'm going to get a job that I probably hate. And I'm going to work from 9 to 5, 5 days a week, go home on the weekends, learn to drink beer, and have a boring life for 40 years and hope there's a retirement. And I thought, that's not living. You know, there's got to be a better way to show young people that they have a raft of choices that just spans way beyond what you imagine. So I started doing a mentoring with Nancy, and ultimately set up a series of blogs, which some of you may have heard of from Nancy, called the Dream Toolbox. It's dreamtoolbox.com if you're interested. And they're little 5-minute vignettes on how do you build what I call an entrepreneurial mind, meaning how do you stop thinking like an employee or like a student in a classroom and start thinking like Steve Jobs or Zuckerberg or whatever, so that you have those opportunities. It doesn't mean you have to go out and form the next Facebook, but how do you not miss opportunities because you just haven't thought about it? So I did that, and then everybody said, well, nobody's going to watch the blog. You're going to have to write a book. So I wrote a book. So that's out there now, also under the same name, Dream Toolbox. But all of it is designed to be not a how-to. I mean, there are jillions of books on how to start a business, how to be an entrepreneur. And they're all kind of nuts and bolts. You know, do A, do B, do C. Here's how you write a business plan. Boring stuff. You need to know it, and you can learn it. When you're ready, you can get it. But what nobody was talking about was how you shifted your mindset from one that says, whenever presented with a situation, I can do that, and shift to that from, oh, I can't do that. And it changes everything in life once you make that core change in what you believe. And when I say believe, I mean at really a gut level. Today, I mean, long ago, I was one of those, oh, I couldn't do that kind of thing. Now, almost anything comes along and say, yeah, I could do that. Do I want to do that? And it's just made my life infinitely better. Nancy, I'm going to shut up for a minute and see what questions you have. As usual, you started me off and I rambled.
No, this is perfect. One thing that I'd love you to talk about, and especially it being senior thesis due tomorrow night at midnight, is what would you say to someone who's trying to, sort of step into the next level of like college, the working world? You and I have talked so much about visualizing, which is such a great way, right, to get yourself into the place of knowing that you can achieve anything. But how do you use that also for not being so overwhelmed, for being able to look at what's in front of you? So 2 parts. What would you suggest when they're all feeling really overwhelmed with everything coming up at school? And then what would you, I'd love you to talk about what visualizing does for you and what visualizing really is in a deeper sense than just picturing yourself for a moment.
Okay, I'm happy to. Let me start with the visualizing part because it'll help with the first question. What I've taught a lot of people to do, what I learned to do, frankly, from reading a book about it many, many years ago, was to visualize what my dream looked like. And the dream could be something as recent as getting the senior thesis in on time and getting a good grade. But whatever it was, the advice I got was think about what you will be like, what your life will be like, what everything around you will be like when you achieve that dream. So, for example, my early dream was I was sick of being poor. And so I wanted to make enough money. My goal wasn't very noble, but it was ambitious. I said, I want to be able to write a check for $1 million and have it not bounce. And so I said, well, then what would that look like? What kind of car would I drive? What kind of house would I live in? And I wanted to live at a house on the beach in Malibu. I'd never even been there, but I knew that's what I wanted somehow. And so I began to visualize all of these things. And the trick was, and this is what I had to learn, to make it so concrete. So take the car, for example. I wanted a Mercedes. And I visualized a brand new Mercedes down to the point that I could smell the leather from a new car. You know how new cars smell. And I could feel, I wanted leather upholstery, so I wanted to feel it. And just everything about it so that it was happening as if it were happening right then and there. Now that sounds like a tall order, but it's really not that tough. You just kind of got used to it. And the reason I called it active dreaming, because you remember, everybody's had this. You have a dream about something and you wake up and there's a period of time when you're not sure whether it was a dream or reality, because all the details were there, and so much detail. If you can envision what it is you want to achieve and where you want your goal to be, with that kind of clarity, the subconscious mind takes over. Now, what I used to do and what I've taught people to do is I used to do it every morning. It felt stupid as heck. Get in front of a mirror and I'd look at myself in the mirror and I'd imagine what I would be like when I wasn't in front of a cracked mirror in a cheap apartment, but actually in my house at the beach in Malibu. And eventually that image gets programmed into your subconscious mind to the point that you just make unconscious decisions that lead to whatever that goal is. And eventually I woke up one morning and said, holy cow, I got to my dream. Then I had to reset a new one, but it was not, each step of the way wasn't a slog. So now, how do you relate that to the senior thesis that's due in less than 24 hours? I think you might do the same thing. First of all, say, what's it going to feel like when I turn that paper in and know that I've done a really good job? And get into detail on what that feeling will be like, because it'll feel great, I'm sure. If it's something you've done and you've done a good job and you turn it in, you just know darn well that Brandy's going to give you an A on it. Brandy, please. Anyway, but that feeling is very empowering because it makes the work leading up to it less drudgery and more fun. Now, nothing that I know of makes writing papers fun. I hate it. You probably do too. But it's very good exercise and very good drill for a lot of other things that you have to do. But if you visualize what it's like to succeed, success comes a lot easier. Nancy, I'm not sure that's a good explanation, but it's the best I can do.
No, I think it's, let me make sure I think it's a great question. In fact, I'd love Michaela to talk to that for a moment, because Michaela just finished or read The Secret over the summer. And we've been talking about manifesting and vision boards. And so I'd just love your thoughts for a moment, Michaela, on what happens when you do really visualize.
Oh no, you put me on the spot. Okay. It makes me feel, how can I say it? Like every time I visualize like my future, it makes me happy, and like it makes me like want to push further in life because I know what I want. Well, not fully, but like I kind of half know what I want. But like the book The Secret like made me realize like I can do it. I just gotta put like my mind to it, you know. So that's basically it. Like it just helps me push forward and work even harder and like try to remove any distractions or negative energy out of my way to lead me to the right path, really.
That's a great, great answer, because I think what happens sometimes is people hear the word visualizing and they in 2 seconds say, okay, great, I can picture buying that car. But it goes much further than that. It goes much deeper than that. And like, I love when Ken, it's my favorite example that you use, when you get to the point where you always say you have to smell the leather, because that's very different, right, than just picturing a cool car. You have to really imagine yourself being in that space.
The more specific you can be and the more sensual you can be about what it is you're imagining, the more that gets into your subconscious. And I know it sounds kind of woo-woo, but it works. It really, no kidding, works.
Yeah, definitely works. In fact, anytime, right, you can speak to the most successful people in the world, that is one thing that they will all have in common. And so, and you can use it as Ken was referring to, anywhere. So I would love
I have a question.
Yes, excellent.
Have you ever visualized something that you felt like was too far out of reach to make you postpone that goal, and then make you?
Yes, and that's a bad trap, because there's a part of our brains, and I think it's either from birth or it gets edited into us very young, that wants to say no. I mean, what's the first stuff you usually hear from your parents? No, don't touch that hot stove, or no, don't do this, or whatever. Even from well-meaning parents, because they're trying to warn us away from the things that can hurt us in life. Yeah. But that also builds up a set of neurological responses, which is to not want to reach too far. And it's really one you want to avoid. I'll tell you a trick that I think is really useful, particularly when you're thinking about your goals. And I've said this before to some of Nancy's classes, but at some point, set aside about 10 minutes, find a quiet place to do it, the library or the back room of your house, wherever it's quiet. And got a pad of paper. And for 10 minutes, write down as fast as you can everything that you would like to do if you knew that you couldn't fail. So, for example, the Wright brothers, if they had done the drill and said, oh, well, a man can't really fly, they'd have left that off the list. But you can't leave it off the list. I don't care how crazy it is. Just fill up the sheet of paper. Then what I used to do was put it away and come back the next day and look at it. And then start thinking about those things. Okay, why can't I do that? Do I really want to do that? There'll be some that are so goofy, you'll say, why did I write that down? But why, is there any real reason I can't do that? And if so, what do I have to do to make it possible? And it shifts your mind in a very useful way. And I recommend that if you're having that problem, is try that out. And then just don't be too quick to reject any idea. You can think of a million examples of people who did wonderful things and people told them they couldn't do it. And they said, well, I think maybe I can, let's try. And that probably goes everything from what is now your iPhone to airplane travel, or whatever you want to think of that we now think of as commonplace. So there was a time when people thought, oh, I couldn't possibly do that. So that's one way to break that pattern.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a question also. So I actually have two questions. So the first one's like, how did you handle like adversity and doubt?
Okay. Well, let me tackle that one first. There's a great technique that I've found, and certainly my wiring, my instinctive wiring that I've had to overcome has been to have a lot of anxiety and doubt. One of the things that I found very useful, it's a little scary to do, But when you're anxious about whatever it is, look at it and say, okay, I want to do this, but I'm scared to death to do it, or whatever. And then say, what's the worst thing that could happen if I try to do this and fail? And almost always the worst thing that could happen if you try it and fail is you might be embarrassed, you might lose some money, you might get a lower grade, but they're all things that are survivable in almost every case. Now, if you're talking about jumping out of airplanes, you do want to make sure you have a parachute, ask Nancy. But in general, the worst is you look at it and say, okay, I could survive the worst that could happen. Then your brain is set to say, okay, I can live through it if I'm wrong, but wow, what happens if I succeed? And that's where your visualization comes in. And all of a sudden, it puts all of those worries and doubts into a perspective that you can deal with. That's been one of the most helpful things in the world for me, is whenever I got in, because I got in a lot of scary things when I was starting my businesses, but I'd say, okay, what's the worst that could happen? Well, the worst that could happen is I'll be really embarrassed with my friends and I'll go broke and I'll have to start over. Well, could I survive that? Yeah, I'm not 80 years old, and I am now, but at the time I wasn't. And I could start over, I could do something else. So try that and see how it works out for you, and then let us know.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. And the second one is like, how can you become a good leader, or like any tips to become a good leader?
That's a harder one in a way, because leadership has a whole lot of components. There was a study done a few years ago, and about leadership and people who had succeeded in big corporations and things like that. And they kind of expected when they started that they would find the leader was very articulate and highly charismatic and so on and so forth. And what they found was that really wasn't the key ingredient. The key ingredients were, one of them was something we've just talked about, which is having the leader having a really clear vision of where he or she wants to go with the business or the class or whatever it is that they're leading, clear vision of where that wants to go. And with that, a belief that, yeah, that's achievable. We can do that. And that becomes contagious. So I think that's probably the best way to become a leader. The other part is, again, it relates to what we just talked about, to not be unduly afraid of failure, because most things worth doing, you won't get right the first time. So you will have failures along the way, or what feel like failures at least. The old story, which we've all heard, is, Edison and the light bulb, and after about 10,000 failures, somebody asked him about it, and supposedly he said, no, I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've just learned 10,000 things that don't work. Very different. So those are the things that I can think of. But leadership's highly intangible, but it starts with belief in yourself. If you believe you can do it, if you can believe that the project that you're leading can be done, people will tend to follow you, because most people don't have that confidence. And they're more than willing to follow somebody who says, oh, okay, he knows the way. I'm gonna go with him. Best advice I can give. I don't know how accurate it is, but I think it'll be helpful.
That's great. I think we have one more.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. What are your success habits?
Very interesting question. Not easily answered. One of the success habits that I had to learn, and it held me back a long time not learning it, was to celebrate the small successes. Because we tend to form big goals, and then along the way there are inevitably setbacks and disappointments and delays and stuff that isn't great. But if on the same way, along the way, you will have successes and small things that are good. And I finally learned to celebrate the small ones along the way, because it just makes it more fun. So that's, in many ways, probably the most useful piece of advice I can give you on that. You had a slightly different question, though, I may have skipped over, so come back to it if I did. You had a second question?
Yeah. What mistakes have you made along the way?
Oh, wow. We don't, is this a 6-hour class? You know, everybody makes mistakes in trying to do things that particularly if you're trying to do something that's ambitious. I think the biggest mistake or mistakes that I have made, and maybe because I've made them more than once, is to not think through my planning very well, particularly in my case, starting companies. One of the things that I used to do was to fall in love with some piece of technology or some new idea. And I never do the hard work of saying, okay, if we build this thing or create this company, who's going to buy it? And where are they? And how many of them are they? And will it actually, will it work economically? And I had a tendency to fall in love with my own ideas and never put them through a test of, okay, who's going to actually want this thing? Once I got a little better at that, my ratio of success to failure got a whole lot better. Because I had some pretty weird ones in the beginning. I had one time, early on, I fell in love with some work that a couple of friends of mine were doing, and they were building what I think are called shadow boxes, little things with glass and butterfly wings and stuff inside them. And they were kind of cute and they were nice decorations. And they convinced me, and I convinced myself, wow, what a great business this would be to make these little boxes. Well, we found out, one, there weren't that many people that were in love with them. B, they were very labor intensive. So each box cost us more in time and materials than we could sell it for. And it was a pretty short-lived business. But that began to teach me the process of saying, okay, where can this go? What are the things I need to avoid to make it happen? Hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you. So I just have one more little something I'd love you to share, Ken.
Uh-oh.
So Ken, I can never go without this story. Ken has been extremely fortunate to have the most incredible late wife and the most incredible current wife, who are both superheroes of their own. But I'd love you to talk for a moment about Yvonne and what she did and who she was.
Well, yeah, Yvonne was an actress. If you watch old movies or old television, you might know her as the very first Batgirl in the Batman television series, not the movies. And then she did about 20 or 30 other movies with Elvis and with Bing Crosby and with a whole bunch of people. And so she had a pretty successful career and was, by the time I met her, her career she'd started to wind down. She'd gone from playing sexy ingenues to had to play, people her age, and she was in her middle 30s or 40s then. And she just didn't want to pursue it that much more. She had been a ballet dancer originally, and so she continued to dance. She danced with Maria Tallchief. If you know ballet, you may know who Maria was, with a company called the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, which at the time was equivalent or better than the New York City Ballet. So she had quite a career, but beyond that was just a remarkable woman. She had more human empathy than anyone I'd ever known in my life up until then. And so I was very lucky. And what I realized, or we realized as we went on, because we were together for 40 years before she died, was that the one thing that always helped make it work was we never stopped courting. We never stopped trying to make each day a little better for the other person. And after a while, I'm tearing up a little bit. After a while, that becomes a lifetime habit, and it was a wonderful one. As it turned out, several years after Yvonne died, I happened to meet another woman named Nadia, who is in all external areas totally different. At her core, I sometimes don't know whether I'm with Nadia or Yvonne, because they both have that same love of life, that same openness to life, trust and belief in other people. And it's been, I tell people I caught lightning in a bottle twice. And,
I know
I don't know why
both.
you brought it up, Nancy, but you got
I
me.
had to, because I think I love to hear that, because you've been so successful in your business and in your life, and everybody who knows you or of you knows of that. But I always feel like, and we do this so much, as you know, in Ambition, to see the human side is so important. I think, in fact, I had some people at the beginning of Ambition would say to me, why do you worry so much about getting to know everybody to know each other personally? Because this is a business class. But if we know each other personally, we can help each other more. We can guide each other more. We can understand where people's strengths and weaknesses lie and why. And I think also, as someone who was fortunate enough to have met Yvonne and to know Nadia, you definitely caught lightning in a bottle twice. And I think they both deserve that tribute always.
Well, they certainly have it from me. And I hope for all of you that you're equally fortunate.
Yes, I think they all will be. This has been so much fun. And again, for all of you, not just because I love Ken and he's a dear friend of mine, the opportunity to talk to someone who's really been there and who has really done things. And I love you guys asking questions. This is just an amazing opportunity. And so we'll do these like once a month or so. There won't be homework. It'll just be about engaging and trying to find those few nuggets that can help you go forward in your life.
Two quick things before I sign off. One is, if you think about stuff, we had some good questions today. Jot them down and save them for the future, because as I've told Nancy, I don't like, sitting up here and just talking. I like to answer questions and interrelate to people. So, keep that in mind. The other is, if between the times that we may be on the air, so to speak, if you have something that you specifically need help with or advice with or an idea, let Nancy know, and she's more than welcome to give out my email address, and you can contact me, and if I can help, I will, and if I can't, I'll tell you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for sharing your morning with me.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm going to drop off the call at this point and leave the rest. Now you can talk about me as soon as I get going.
Have a good one.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Ken. All right. So I'm just going to give you your codes, but I just want to tell you guys, seriously, people pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a few hours of Ken's time. And when he says he's there, if you have any questions, any advice, he is 1,000%. He's met with so many of the students. He's 83 years old. He got up this morning to make sure he's on kidney dialysis every night. He has to plug in at 10 p.m. and can't get out of bed until 10 a.m. Because he has to stay connected. He's actually he just got on the list for a kidney transplant. But he actually made sure he was in bed by 8 last night so he could be unplugged and be here with you guys. I'm telling you, it's hard to understand, I know, how much someone who's 83 could help you. There's probably nobody better than people that have been through what he has. He's bought and sold, I can't even count how many companies. He's advised so many people. He's had successes, he's had failures. And when he says he's there for you guys, again, I just can't emphasize it enough. So thank you guys for asking questions. I'll see you on Wednesday.
Okay, see you later.
Okay, thanks.
Bye,
Bye.
Nancy.
Bye.
Bye.